It was 11:47 in the morning on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And I was standing at the altar in a rented tuxedo that cost more than my first car, watching the woman I had loved for 4 years walk down the aisle toward me. The church smelled like roses and expensive candles. 200 guests sat in pews decorated with white ribbons and lilies. Her favorite flower. And yes, her name, too. Lily. I had thought it was poetic once. I had thought a lot of things once. She looked beautiful. I will not lie about that. Even now. Her dress was cathedral length. Ivory silk with lace along the neckline. And her dark hair was pinned up with small pearl clips that had belonged to her grandmother. She had shown them to me the week before, teary-eyed, saying they were something old and something borrowed, combined into one. I had kissed her forehead and told her she was going to be the most stunning bride anyone in that church had ever seen. I meant every word. She was smiling as she walked. Her father had her arm, and the organ played, and 200 people rose to their feet, and I felt my chest tighten with something that I thought was love. I know better now. What I was feeling was trust. Complete, total, catastrophic trust in a woman who did not deserve a single thread of it. She reached the altar. Her father placed her hand in mine. She looked up at me, and her eyes were bright. And I squeezed her fingers, and the officiant opened his book. And I genuinely believed, that this was it. The beginning of everything. Then the church doors opened. The sound was wrong. The hinges groaned, and the late morning light cut through the dim interior like a blade, and every head in those pews turned. I turned too because you turn when something interrupts the silence of a ceremony. Because your instincts don't care that it's your wedding day. Because the timing is catastrophic. He was tall, dark-haired. He wore jeans and a gray jacket like he had dressed with the specific intention of looking like he hadn't tried. And he stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. And he looked directly at Lily. Not at the guests. Not at me. At her. And she made a sound. I felt it before I heard it. A small exhale, sharp and involuntary, like someone had pressed a thumb into a bruise. Her fingers went slack in mine. I looked at her face and watched something happen to it that I do not have clean words for. It was not surprise exactly. It was something older than surprise. Something that had been waiting. Ryan, she whispered. She said his name like a prayer. She said his name the way she had never once said mine. I stood there still holding her loosening hand, and watched my fiancée look at another man with her whole face open and unguarded in front of 200 people. In front of God and family and the officiant, who still had his book raised and his mouth open. And I felt the first cold wave of it move through me. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter and more devastating. The understanding that I had been wrong about something fundamental. That the story I had been living in was not the story that was actually happening. Ryan walked down the aisle. He actually walked down the aisle at my wedding. Slow and unhurried, like a man who owns the room. And nobody stopped him because the entire church was frozen in collective disbelief. My best man, Derek, put his hand on my shoulder. I shook my head slightly. I wanted to see this. I needed to see all of it. He stopped at the front of the aisle, maybe 8 feet from us. And he looked at Lily with an expression I recognized, even though I had never seen it on his face before, because I had felt it myself once when I thought it was real. It was the expression of a man who thinks he loves someone. Lily, he said. His voice carried in the silence. I made a mistake. I know it's late. I know this is insane, but I couldn't let you do this. 200 people stopped breathing. Lily let go of my hand. She didn't step toward him immediately. She stood there between us for a moment that stretched like taffy, her face doing complex things. And I watched all of it. Every flicker of it. And I understood with a clarity that was almost physically painful that whatever she decided in the next 10 seconds had been decided long before today. That this was not a shock to her the way it was a shock to me. That somewhere in the back of her mind, she had been waiting for this door to open. She stepped toward him. Lily, my voice came out very quiet. She stopped, half-turned. The look on her face was the most honest thing I had ever seen from her. And that was the cruelest part because what it said was, I am sorry, James. But not sorry enough to stay. I can't, she said. Just those 2 words. I can't do this. You can't do what? I asked. Still quiet, still controlled. My hands had gone very cold. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I thought I was ready. I thought I had moved past. I thought. She stopped, shook her head. Her eyes went back to Ryan and didn't come back to me. I can't marry you, James. The church erupted. I don't remember the specific sounds individually. I remember it as a single noise. 200 people reacting at once. A wave of gasping and whispering and someone crying. Her mother, I think, which was almost funny. And the officiant saying something useless. And Derek's hand on my shoulder tightening. And I stood at that altar in my rented tuxedo that cost more than my first car. And I did not say a single word. This is the part people don't understand when I tell the story. They expect rage. They expect me to have confronted Ryan or grabbed Lily's arm or made a scene that matched the one being made at my expense. But here is what 4 years with Lily had quietly, invisibly taught me. She did not respond to emotion the way most people do. Emotion for me specifically, my anger, my hurt, my need, she had always used as evidence that I was too much, that I was dramatic, that I was the problem. So I had trained myself over 4 years to stay very still when I was most wounded. I stayed still now. I looked at her walking down the aisle towards the door with Ryan's hand at the small of her back. And I made a decision that took perhaps 3 seconds and would determine the next several years of my life. I was not going to chase her. I was not going to beg. I was not going to give her the scene she could later describe to Ryan in whispered conversations as evidence that she had made the right choice. I was going to make her understand in the clearest possible terms what she had just thrown away. And I was going to do it right now in front of every single person who had watched her do it. I turned to my left. She was standing 2 steps away, still in her position as maid of honor, and she was watching me with an expression that contained multitudes. Her name was Claire. She and Lily had been best friends since college, and she had spent the last 2 months helping plan this wedding, organizing the bachelorette trip, holding Lily's dress, arranging the flowers. She was wearing a sage green bridesmaid dress and holding a small bouquet of white roses. And her eyes, dark and steady and currently fixed on me with an expression of absolute bewilderment, were the most honest eyes in the room. Claire and I had been friends by proximity for 4 years. But in the last 6 months, she had become something more specific. The person I called when I wasn't sure if I was seeing things clearly. Not about the relationship. She was loyal to Lily, and I respected that. But about other things. Work, family. The kind of 2 a.m. conversations that happen when 2 people realize they actually understand each other. I had told myself it was friendship. I had been careful with it. But I was not confused about what it was. I walked to her. Claire, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. James, I had no idea she was gonna. I know, I said. I know you didn't. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what this is. Are you okay? No, I said honestly. But I'm about to do something, and I need you to understand that I mean it completely. This isn't reaction. This isn't chaos. I've known this for a while, and today just made it impossible to keep pretending I didn't. She stared at me. Behind me, the church had gone from chaos back to a horrified silence because people had noticed I wasn't following Lily to the door. They were watching me now. 200 people. Her family. My family. The officiant with his useless book. I reached into the inner pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I had put the ring there this morning as a kind of joke to myself. The engagement ring I had bought for Lily, which I had taken back from her last night as a wedding tradition thing, planning to put it on her finger during the ceremony. I had slipped it in my pocket and patted it twice and thought, this is the last morning of your life before you're a married man. I had felt nothing but happiness. I took the ring out. I looked at Claire. I know this is not a normal situation, I said. And I know this is the least normal way to do this. But I've been trying to figure out for 6 months what to do with the fact that every time I'm confused about something, you're the first person I want to call. And that every time I'm happy about something, I think about telling you first. And that I've been pretending that's just friendship because it was easier than dealing with what it actually was. I paused. I'd rather deal with it now. The silence in that church was absolute. Claire, I said, will you marry me? Not today. Not even soon. But eventually. When we've done this properly. When we've had the time and the space and the honesty that this deserves. Will you say yes to that? She put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled completely. James, I know, I said. Or take your time. She laughed, which was not what I expected, and it was a broken sound, but it was real. And she shook her head slowly. And then she looked at me for a long moment with those steady, dark eyes. And she said, yes. The ring was too big for her finger. We both noticed it at the same moment. And both almost smiled. I heard the church door behind me. I did not turn around. But from the sound of it, the sudden sharp intake of breath from the guests nearest the entrance, The way the whispers changed register entirely. Lily had turned around. She had seen. I kept my eyes on Claire. 3 weeks later, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the ruins of a life I was systematically dismantling, and I tried to understand the full shape of what had happened to me. Lily had moved her things out in 2 trips, both times while I was at work because she had a key until she didn't. And I had texted her once to say I'd leave it under the mat, and once to say I hadn't. She left the key on the kitchen counter along with a note that said, "I'm sorry, James." And nothing else. 3 words for 4 years. I threw the note away without reading it twice. The apartment felt enormous. We had decorated it together, chosen every piece of furniture together, argued pleasantly over curtain colors and couch dimensions. And now I walked through it alone and cataloged everything that needed to be replaced. I didn't feel it yet. That was shock probably, or something like it. The way trauma buffers itself against immediate processing. Derek came over that first week with beer and the specific kind of silence that good friends offer when they know talking would be insulting. We watched 3 hours of basketball. He didn't mention Lily. He didn't mention Claire. He just showed up, which was the only useful thing anyone could do. My mother called every day. My father called twice, which was twice more than his usual nothing, which told me how badly the church incident had rattled even him. His message was simple. "I'm proud of how you handled yourself, son." 7 words. He had never said anything like that to me in my life. I saved the voicemail. The anger came on day 9. I had gone back to work earlier than I should have, partly because the apartment was oppressive and partly because I needed the structure. I was in a meeting about quarterly projections when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I stepped out to read it, and it said, "This is Ryan. I think we should talk." I stood in the hallway outside the conference room, and I read that text 4 times. Ryan thought we should talk. Ryan, who had walked into my wedding in jeans and a gray jacket, who had said Lily's name like a prayer, who had put his hand on the small of her back and walked her out of a church full of people and a future I had built. Ryan thought we should talk. The cold thing in my chest cracked open. I saved his number. I didn't respond. I went back into the meeting and I sat down and I stared at the quarterly projections and I felt the rage arrive in full like weather, like something that had been building offshore for weeks and had now made landfall. It was clean, actually clarifying. The grief had been murky and disorienting, but this was simple. I had been wronged specifically, methodically, and on a scale that most people never have to reckon with. And I was going to reckon with it in kind. But I was not going to be reckless. Reckless people make mistakes and give their targets ammunition. I had watched Lily use my emotions against me for 4 years. I was not going to make the same mistake with Ryan. I called Derek that night. Then I called my cousin Philip, who worked in finance and knew things about financial structures and asset tracing that I had never had cause to care about before. Then I called a woman named Grace, who had been my colleague for 6 years, and who I knew specifically had done a deep investigation on her ex-husband during their divorce proceedings that had resulted in a settlement so favorable it was briefly discussed in a local legal journal. I need to know everything, I told each of them. Everything that's true. Everything that's findable. Everything that matters. About Lily? Derek asked. About both of them. What I learned in the following 2 weeks was instructive. Ryan had not spontaneously appeared at my wedding out of romantic impulse. Ryan and Lily had been in contact for 4 months. I knew this because Claire, who was now in the strange new reality we were both navigating, someone I was talking to every day, told me what she had pieced together from her own shock and guilt in the aftermath. Claire had not known about the communication, but she remembered now a phone call she had half overheard. A conversation Lily had cut short when she entered the room. A shift in Lily's energy around that time that Claire had attributed to pre-wedding nerves. It was not nerves. Philip found the rest. Ryan was not the romantic figure he had presented himself as in that church doorway. He had left Lily 2 years ago for another woman. A fact that Lily had told me in a version that cast her as a victim and him as the villain. The version Philip uncovered was more complicated. Ryan had left because Lily had been emotionally unstable during a period of personal difficulty, had made his life very small for 18 months, and had ultimately driven him out. The woman he'd gone to after Lily had ended things with him 8 months ago, but he had reached back out to Lily because he was lonely and she was familiar, and she had responded because she had never fully processed losing him the first time. They had built something secret in the space of 4 months. And apparently this was the part that hit hardest. Ryan had not even been certain he was going to show up to the wedding until the morning of. He had told Lily this was possible. She had known there was a chance he might come. She had walked down that aisle anyway. She had held my hand and looked up at my face and let the organ play. And she had known that she might be about to do exactly what she did. Grace was the one who helped me understand the financial dimension. And the financial dimension was one I had not fully considered. Lily and I had a joint savings account that we had opened 18 months ago in anticipation of the wedding and the life after it. There was a significant amount in it built from both our contributions over that 18 months. And Lily had moved the entirety of her half. Plus, I discovered a transfer of $3,000 from the joint portion. The day after the wedding that didn't happen, I called my bank before noon. I also called the venue, the caterers, the florist, and the photographer, all of whom I had paid deposits to totaling nearly $15,000. The contracts were in my name. The wedding had been canceled by the bride. 3 of the 4 vendors had clauses specific to abandonment of event scenarios that entitled me to partial or full refund under those circumstances. Grace helped me draft the letters. Within 3 weeks, I had recovered $11,000. The $3,000 from the joint account was a different matter. A lawyer friend named Tom reviewed the documentation and told me it was recoverable. We filed. Lily called when she received the legal paperwork. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 6 minutes long and contained an order, shock, indignation, accusation, a brief window of what might have been genuine remorse, and then a return to indignation. She said I was being cruel. She said she understood she had hurt me, but that this was excessive. She said that Ryan and she were trying to build something, and that my actions were making that very difficult. I listened to it twice. I saved it to a folder I was building. I did not call back. The social dimension unfolded on its own because it always does. 200 people had been in that church. 200 people had seen Ryan walk down the aisle. Had seen Lily drop my hand and say she couldn't. Had seen me turn and propose to her maid of honor on the spot. Stories like that do not stay contained. Within 4 days of the wedding that wasn't, I had received 47 messages from guests, family members, mutual friends, and 3 people I hadn't spoken to since college who had apparently heard through 6 degrees of connection. I did not put anything on social media. I didn't need to. Lily's version of events leaked first, as it always does when someone is trying to control a narrative. The version going around in her social circle, which I know because Derek heard it from someone who heard it from her cousin, was that she had experienced a last-minute crisis of conscience and had been honest about it rather than go through with a wedding she wasn't ready for. Ryan was framed as a catalyst, but not a cause. She was repositioning herself as someone who had made a brave, difficult choice. I let that version circulate for 2 weeks. Then I had a quiet dinner with 4 people. Derek, Philip, a woman named Hannah who had been close to both Lily and me and who had been visibly furious on my behalf since the church, and Hannah's husband, who worked in marketing and understood how information moved. I laid out simply and without drama the documented timeline. For months of contact. The transferred $3,000. The vendor contracts. The voicemail, which I played once. I did not tell them what to do with any of this. I didn't have to. Hannah posted something the following day that was carefully worded but specific. Nothing libelous, just the timeline framed as her own experience of learning the truth about a situation she had been misled about. It linked to nothing and named no one explicitly. But the people who needed to understand it understood it. The response was significant. Lily's curated narrative collapsed inside a week. The version that had been circulating, brave choice, last-minute honesty, difficult but right, was replaced by the version that was actually true. For months of secret contact. An $800 wedding budget spent partly on the assumption that there was a real wedding coming. A $3,000 transfer from a joint account. And a groom who had found out along with everyone else in real time at the altar. Several of Lily's friends went quiet. 2 of them reached out to me directly. Her college roommate sent me a message that said simply, "I always thought something was off. I'm sorry, James. You deserved better." Ryan's appearance at the wedding had also not been received the way he might have hoped. He had apparently operated under the romantic delusion that walking into a church to stop a wedding was a grand gesture that onlookers would admire. Instead, the footage, because of course someone had filmed it on their phone, showed a man interrupting what should have been a joyful ceremony and causing visible devastation to someone who had done nothing wrong. The video circulated. Ryan's employer, a mid-sized architectural firm, had reportedly received several emails from clients who had been wedding guests and who found themselves reconsidering their professional relationship with someone of his demonstrated character. I had not sent any of those emails. I want to be precise about that. I had mentioned to Philip in passing that Ryan worked at that firm, and I had mentioned the name of the firm. What Philip or anyone else chose to do with publicly available information about a man's professional affiliation was not something I controlled. Ryan texted me twice more. I did not respond. Lily texted me once to say she had heard what Hannah posted and that I had orchestrated it. I responded for the first time since the church with a single line. I documented facts. The interpretation belongs to the audience. She didn't write back. And here is the part that people want to be simple, but isn't. What had happened at the altar with Claire was real. It was also objectively one of the most chaotic contexts in which a meaningful thing has ever been expressed. And we both knew that the yes she had said in that church needed to be examined in actual daylight outside of the performance of crisis. We were not naive about this. We talked about it directly and at length starting the day after the wedding. She had not known about Ryan's contact with Lily. She was clear on this, and I believed her. She had been Lily's closest friend for 7 years. And the discovery that Lily had kept this from her, that she had planned a wedding while secretly corresponding with an ex, that she had potentially known Ryan might show up, that she had used Claire's genuine effort and care for the event without telling her any of the relevant truth, was its own particular devastation. Claire spent the first week after the church largely in tears, grieving not just the friendship, but her own certainty that she had understood the person she trusted most. I feel stupid, she told me one night about 10 days out. We were sitting on my couch, and she had a cup of tea, and she was not crying anymore, which was progress. You're not stupid, I said. She was careful about what she showed you. I should have seen it. She's been hiding things from me for 4 years. I didn't see it either, I said. She looked at me sideways. You saw something. That's why you turned to me. I thought about that. I think I knew something wasn't right, I said. I didn't know the shape of it, but I think I knew. She nodded slowly. We sat in the quiet for a while. The ring thing, she said eventually. The proposal. Yes. Was it? She stopped, started again. I need to know it wasn't just the moment. It wasn't just the moment, I said. I told you at the time, I've known this for a while. I paused. I was in a situation where I had made commitments and I was trying to honor them. I told myself what I felt for you was friendship because it was easier than the alternative. The alternative being blowing up your engagement. Yes. She absorbed this. So, you were unhappy. I searched for the right word. Incomplete. I kept thinking there was something missing, and I kept attributing it to the wedding stress, or the planning, or the general anxiety of a big life transition. But it wasn't any of those things. She put her tea down. She looked at me very directly. I need us to do this slowly, she said. Whatever this is, I need time to process Lily. And I need you to have time to process Lily. And I need this to be real and not rebound or revenge or convenience. I know, I said. Say it explicitly. I'm not in a hurry, I said. I'm not using you to feel better about her. What I said in that church was true. I meant the eventually part. We have time. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she picked her tea back up. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. It took 4 months before we went on what either of us was willing to call a date. During those 4 months, we talked more honestly than I have ever talked to another person in my life. We talked about what she had felt watching me with Lily over the years. A conversation that was difficult for her because of what it implied about her loyalty to a friendship she was simultaneously grieving. We talked about what I had felt gradually and why I had not acted on it, and what that said about my capacity for self-deception. We talked about what we wanted from our lives and whether those things were compatible. We had arguments, actual disagreements about real things, and we worked through them without either of us shutting down or going cold. It was the most functional I had ever been in a relationship, even before it was officially a relationship. Derek, who had watched all of this with the careful attention of someone who loves you and is not sure whether to be happy or worried, said to me after the 3rd month, "She's good for you. You're different." Different? How? Relaxed, he said. You were always slightly braced when you were with Lily. Like you were waiting for something to go wrong. With Claire, you just exist. I thought about that for a long time. He was right. I had spent 4 years slightly tensed without ever fully understanding why. And I had attributed it to my own personality. my own anxiety, my own difficulty with vulnerability. What I had not understood was that the tension was a rational response to being in a relationship with someone who had never fully chosen me. Lily had never fully chosen me. I understood that now in a way that didn't hurt as much as it should. She had chosen the idea of me, stable, reliable, present, competent, while keeping a door open to the person who made her feel something more volatile. She had used my steadiness without offering me her full truth. And I had stayed year after year, because I thought love meant being patient with people's incompleteness. It doesn't. That's not love. That's just waiting. I saw Lily once more about 7 months after the wedding. It wasn't planned. I was at a restaurant with Claire and Derek's girlfriend at the time. And Lily came in with a group that included Ryan and 2 couples I vaguely recognized. She saw me first. I know because I saw her reaction before I saw her, which was the table going slightly quiet and Derek's expression doing something careful. I turned and found her looking at me from across the room. She looked fine, technically put together. She was wearing a blue dress I hadn't seen before, and her hair was down, and she had made an effort. But there was something in her posture that had changed, something that wasn't there before, a kind of watchfulness that sat around her eyes and didn't match the composed rest of her. Ryan was beside her. He looked at me and then looked away, which was the correct choice. I looked at Lily for a moment, not a long one, just long enough for her to understand that I had seen her, that I was not going to pretend otherwise, and that I was completely, genuinely fine. Then I turned back to the table and picked up the thread of the conversation that had briefly paused. She came over 15 minutes later. I had half expected it. "James," she said. "Lily." I kept my voice neutral and pleasant. The voice of someone who has moved past the thing she represents. She glanced at Claire, who met her eyes steadily, and then looked back at me. Something complicated passed across Lily's face. Is there any chance we could talk just for a minute?" I considered this. I could have said no. I could have ended it there, which would have been cleaner and was what she deserved. But I was curious in the detached way you are curious about a story you have already fully processed. I wanted to see the ending she had written for herself. "Sure," I said. We stepped to a quieter corner of the restaurant. She stood very straight, which told me she was nervous and was trying to hide it. "You look good," she said. "Thank you." A pause. She looked at her hands and then back up. "I heard about some of the things that happened. With Ryan's work and with Hannah's post and the legal filing." "Okay," I said. "Was all of that necessary?" I looked at her for a moment. "You transferred $3,000 from our joint account the day after the wedding." Her jaw tightened. "I contributed to that account. You also moved your own half." "I didn't touch that. The $3,000 was joint funds." I said it without heat because I genuinely felt none. The legal filing was about accuracy. Hannah's post was about accuracy. The rest was other people's decisions about information that was already true. She was quiet. "Then, what about Claire? What about her? Are you actually with her, or was that just?" "Yes," I said simply. Another pause. She looked at something over my shoulder, which was probably them, and then back at me. "I didn't plan for it to go the way it did," she said. "I want you to know that. The ceremony, I didn't want it to go that way. But you knew it might." She was very still. "Yes. And you walked down the aisle anyway." "Nothing." "Okay," I said. "I appreciate that. Thank you for saying so." She blinked. She had expected more from me clearly. Anger or residual feeling or an opening she could step into and use to rebalance the scale between us. What she got was genuine indifference, which is so much more final than anger. "Is that all?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "I hope things work out for you, Lily." I mean that without irony. She looked at me for a long moment, and I watched her face go through something private and difficult. And then she said, "I think I made a mistake." "I know," I said, "but it's not my mistake anymore." I went back to the table. Claire looked at me with a question in her eyes, and I shook my head once, smiling slightly. And she reached over and put her hand on mine, and we went back to dinner. And Lily and Ryan were gone from the restaurant when I next glanced over. And I did not check whether they left together or separately, because it did not matter. A year and 4 months after the wedding that didn't happen, on a Saturday morning in October, when the light came through the windows in long flat bars and the apartment smelled like coffee and something Claire was baking, I thought about what I would say if someone asked me what I had learned. I had learned that trust is not a gift you give universally. That patience, when it is applied to someone who does not merit it, is not a virtue. It is a slow erasure of your own judgment. I had learned that the instinct I had suppressed for 4 years, the quiet, persistent voice that said something is not right, was not anxiety or pessimism or self-sabotage. It was accurate. I had simply trained myself to ignore it in the name of commitment. I had learned that I was capable of far more than I had been performing. My career had expanded in the months since the wedding, partly because the energy I had been directing into maintaining an emotionally demanding relationship had been redirected. I had been promoted. I had started a side project with Philip that was generating real income. I slept better. I thought more clearly. I was better at my work and better in my friendships and better at being present in the room I was actually in. I had learned that the proposal at the altar, which everyone who heard about it either celebrated as boldly romantic or dismissed as reactive and chaotic, was genuinely the most honest thing I had done in years. It was not a performance. It was not revenge, though it had that secondary effect. It was the first moment in longer than I could calculate that I had told the complete truth about what I wanted without hedging it for someone else's comfort. Claire came into the room with a mug for me, and sat down, and tucked her feet up, and opened her book. And I watched her for a moment with something that was entirely uncomplicated. That was the other thing I had learned. The most important one. Love is not supposed to require constant maintenance of your own doubt. It is not supposed to feel like a problem you are perpetually solving. When it is right, it is simply the most natural context in the world. The place where you are most legibly yourself. Where your instincts are sound and your judgment is trustworthy. And the quiet voice in your chest says, yes, this is the right room. Stay here. I stayed. Somewhere across the city, I had heard through Derek, who had heard through Hannah that Ryan and Lily had moved in together. And that things were apparently complicated. That the qualities Lily had valued in me, the steadiness, the reliability, the patience, were things she was discovering she needed. And that Ryan was struggling to provide. That she had said to someone who had eventually said it to someone who had eventually said it to Hannah. I think I confused feeling something with having something real. I had no feelings about this. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not lingering grief. Just the mild, distant recognition that some lessons come on time and some come too late. And that the difference is not always in the lesson, but in when you were willing to learn it. The ring we'd had resized fit perfectly. Now I had given it to her again properly on a Tuesday evening in her kitchen when I was ostensibly helping her cook dinner and actually doing very little cooking. No audience, no drama. Just the two of us and the ordinary radical act of choosing each other with full information. In full clarity. With no doors left open and nothing hidden on either side. She had said yes again. This time it wasn't complicated.